Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this not so sunny Thursday. I don't know about everyone else, but it's not so sunny here. And we are very excited about talking about the topic today, the do's and don'ts of alterations to sectional title units. We are here today with Willie Roos and Aubrey Snehman from Multiprof Property Intelligence. And this is the first webinar that we are collaborating with Multiprof Property Intelligence on. So we're really excited to be joining with them, and hopefully we can have lots of more webinars in the future. So first of all, as I said, the webinar is being recorded, and we will share it after the webinar is finished. You're welcome to send us questions via the Q&A or the chat functionality during the webinar. We will try our best to answer these questions during the webinar. If we don't get to them, we will answer them after the fact. But for now, let's introduce our speakers. So today we've got Willie Roos here. Willie from Stratafin, he's the CEO of Stratafin. Willie has practiced as a property attorney for over 20 years. He has been involved in sectional title management for over 8 years. Willie started Stratafin in 2014 with the goal of assisting bodies corporate with their funding without catching them in a debt trap. Stratafin strives to be a fair and equitable money provider for the sectional title industry. And Willie has built up Stratafin from its inception to today, where it has debtors under management of over 300 million rand. And then Stratafin has also partnered with MediCapital, and the PRC has invested with 45% ownership. Over to Aubrey Snehman. Aubrey is the CEO of Multiprof Property Intelligence. Multiprof Property Intelligence was founded in 1998 by Aubrey. After qualifying as a town and regional planner at the University of Pretoria, he spent the next 10 years gaining experience as a senior town planner at the City Council of Pretoria and the Department of Housing. In 1990, he started acting as a consultant for the property industry, and his interest in connecting the dots between professionals in the industry led him to establish Multiprof Property Intelligence. It is a versatile yet focused consulting enterprise, offering a spectrum of services including town planning, architecture, property information, and training. Aubrey is passionate about sharing his vast amount of knowledge, and his ever-popular training sessions include a variety of topics, ranging from town planning, building plans, and sectional title to personal development. In his spare time, Aubrey loves to backpack, travel the world, using mostly public transport. He is a couch surfing ambassador for South Africa and an active contributor to the international human library community. But enough about us. I want to learn about you today. So I'm going to be putting a poll out for everyone. And the question we want to ask is, tell us more about yourself. Are you a trustee, an owner, or a managing agent? And you can choose all that apply to you. So please, you'll see it pop up in your screen now. Please answer, and then we can find out a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you. I think I will just introduce perhaps the complicated nature of the subject today. Very short. We are talking about communal living. That implicates that people need to cooperate. And as Willie like to call it, we need a Ubuntu attitude. Because we're living normally in medium to higher density, and we show shared ownership, and the laws and rules and regulations that is applicable, there's a lot of factors to consider when we look at any changes and alterations in complexes. The purpose of all of it is to ensure the quality of life within the complexes, as well as the safety of the occupants. So everything we're going to talk about today has to do with the complexities. I always joke in the training and say a complex is called a complex because it is complex. So yeah, over to Willie. I think he's going to discuss a few of the basics and give us his experience. Thanks, Willie.
Thanks, Aubrey. Yes, I'm going to deal with the stuff that is not that complex, and then we're going to leave the complex stuff in your hands to teach us all about what is required. And I think there are lots of people that want to understand more from you and less from us what the Sectional Title Act says, but obviously it all relates to each other. So let's start with the basics. We're going to have a look at what common property is. We're going to have a look at what exclusive use areas are. We're going to just have a quick look at what the body corporate is entitled to do, how they can do it. And then we're going to look at the use of sections and the use of common property just quickly before we then go over to you. So the first question that arises is, what is common property? So obviously common properties are all those parts of a scheme which is not included in your section. So it is all the land and the space, the corridors, the additional buildings, and then all and any additional land that the body corporate may have acquired, or units. We see that quite often happening now in the inner city schemes where the bodies corporate actually purchase their own units themselves, and that then becomes common property and also part of the scheme in that sense. So that is what the common property is. So it is all that stuff that is not yours on the inside of your unit. Then your exclusive use area, those are the areas that you have the right to exclusively use. So in terms of the 1971 Act, the developer could grant certain exclusive use rights. There could also be a notarial, and in terms of the new act now as well, a notarial cession of certain rights in respect of certain areas, for example, parking bays, parking areas, garages, storerooms, and so forth. And those areas can also be given to you and your garden, for example. And those areas can also, the exclusive use of that can also be given to you in terms of the rules. So those are then rule-created exclusive use areas. You are not the owner of those areas. You have the right of usage of that, but it still remains common property, and it's still part of what is owned by the people in general. So everybody has an undivided share in that property. The conduct rules prohibit you from doing anything that defaces or damages the common property, which obviously then includes your exclusive use area. So you can't put up a Wendy house or a pool, although you might think that that's not defacing it. Obviously, it is changing. It's changing what it is, and as such, you can't do that unless you've got the required permission, which Aubrey will explain to us later on exactly what is required and to what extent things have to be done. Right, so what can the body corporate do? What are they allowed to do? Are they allowed to sell common property? Are they allowed to allow an owner to make extensions? And we find those authorizations in the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act in Section 5, and specifically 5.1a and 5.1e and then 5.1h. That says a body corporate have the right to alienate common property upon unanimous resolution by the owners. So I think we've had a webinar on different types of resolutions. So unanimous resolution, you've got the higher percentage of 80% of owners that must partake in that meeting, and then all owners that are then part of that meeting needs to vote in favor of that, and then you have a unanimous resolution. 30 days notice needs to be given in respect of those type of meetings. Also, upon unanimous resolutions in terms of 5.1e, they are entitled to cede the right of exclusive use to an owner as well. So again, the same type of scenario. And then also in terms of 5.1h, on application by an owner upon a special resolution, one can, or the body corporate can, approve extensions of boundaries. So special resolution, you need a normal quorum, 75% of those voting at the quorum or at that form part of the quorum then is required to allow the body corporate to proceed on that basis. Okay, so how can the body corporate then do that? One needs to go and have a look if alterations are, and I'm now dealing with alterations by the body corporate itself in respect of common property, those alterations that are reasonably necessary, they must give a unanimous resolution, and plans need to be drawn up and approved, and that will happen on that basis in terms of Rule 29.1. Reasonably necessary improvements require only a special resolution, and again, the body corporate need to explain what the cost will be, where the money is coming from, will there be a special levy that will be levied, drawings must be included in respect of the alterations and so forth, and Aubrey will deal with that a bit later on. Okay, then the use of sections and common property. The body corporate must at all times make sure that whatever is done in a unit or an exclusive use area does not interfere with the rights of others. It should not cause a nuisance to others, and it should not also contravene any laws, which include the bylaws, any licensing requirements that is required, the conditions of title. So there are many conditions of title in title deeds that, for example, say that you cannot build within a certain area or within a certain distance from a boundary wall and so forth. So it cannot also be in contravention of that. Obviously, it also, any alterations and changes that are made must not impair the stability of the buildings as a whole, and it must also not affect the value of units or of the building as a whole. So you need to make sure that what is done in a way that actually puts value onto the scheme and does not detract from the value of the scheme. Right, and then the extending on exclusive use areas, Management Rule 30G says that the body corporate must make all reasonable steps to ensure that a member of a section does not construct or place any structures or improvements on his exclusive use area which does not comply with all these laws and bylaws and conditions of title. But if they are of the opinion that it does not do so, and they can then prescribe reasonable conditions for such an improvement or change, and that can then be done by way of ordinary resolution. They can allow that, but they can also put some consent on there, and that consent can be, or conditions on the consent, and those conditions, if not met, can be withdrawn. So I think that is the basis where the Act require, or what the Act requires in respect of alterations, changes, and extensions. But I think Aubrey will now go into the nitty-gritty of what is actually required from a town planning point of view, the Sectional Title Act, and so forth. Over to you, Aubrey.
Thank you, Willie. I hope I didn't confuse you too much with moving the slides around when I was not supposed to, but I'm not a trained slide changer, so sorry about that. Okay, let's start off with, I think, the one message that I would like to bring home today to especially trustees and managing agents. The first and most important message I would like to say is that when any owner asks for permission to make any changes or alterations, please just, when the answer is yes, just give a proper full answer, stating that the trustees have in principle no objection to additions or alterations on condition that the provisions of the town planning scheme, the National Building Regulations and Sectional Title Act, Sectional Title Schemes Management Act and prescribed rules are adhered to. In real life, we find often that owners ask for permission for the trustees for permission. They get a positive answer, and they assume that now they have the right to carry on and make the alterations. And we sit in schemes at this stage with hundreds of illegal additions because procedure was not followed, because the owners assume that trustee permission is all that is required. We want to have a look at where all these rules and regulations come from a town planning point of view. And it all starts with the town planning scheme, whereby the earth you're dealing with have a zoning. Zoning just meaning what type of activities can you have on the property and how much of it. This is a typical copy of a zoning certificate, and typically it would be in Tshwane, but most of the local authorities will have something similar, but you will have to check in your specific area for the details of it. It will be a zoning called residential 2. In the old days, it was called group housing. And on a residential 2 property, you can erect a complex normally. But there is restrictions, and that is all in the zoning certificate. In the case of Tshwane, just for easy reference, there's a schedule that determine a few aspects. Now, first thing would be the density, the amount of units that can be built on the property. Secondly, it's the coverage. We look at that now. There's floor area ratio and the height of the buildings. Then there's a condition about a required site development plan. And very important, there is some parking requirements. So all of those you'll find in the zoning certificate, and I would advise all the managing agents and the trustees to at least have a copy of your scheme zoning certificate in your files, because you will learn a lot about the property that you might not know. Now, coverage is one of the issues that we often find problems with in complex. Coverage means the percentage area of the property, including servitude areas, covered by roofed areas of all buildings as seen vertically from above. So in easy terms, if you have a bird's eye view on your property, anything where you can't see the ground, that would be seen as coverage. And typically in a scheme, it would be 30% or 40%. And one of the problems that we have is that when illegal, especially carports are added, often the coverage is exceeded. And in some cases, you need to apply, or other cases, it can just not be increased. And then you sit with a problem. As far as additions and alterations is concerned, the documents that one really should have before you can make a decision if this alterations is possible is you need the site development plan that we refer to in the zoning certificate. Now, it's not in all properties relevant. So in your zoning certificate, you'll see if it is, but mostly for complexes, a site development plan is required. What is a site development plan? That's basically the plan that is submitted even before a building plan is submitted by the developer, whereby the council can decide if the layout of this complex will have a positive effect on the living conditions, it will indicate things like entrances and exits, parking areas, gardening areas, and the position and layout of the units to prevent things like unwanted sight lines between units, traffic jams, people not having privacy, and similar things. So before any changes can be considered, one needs to know what is on the site development plan, and council have to approve any changes that is made in a complex by means of the site development plan. Then, of course, there's the building plan. That is the detail plans indicating all the sewerage, all those details, the how it's laid out, ventilation, all of those things. We won't go into details. And then, of course, the sectional title plans. Now, we must distinguish between a building plan and a sectional title plan, whereas the building plan, the purpose of that is to ensure the safe construction within legal requirements. Sectional title plans deal with ownership. So the fact that there is a sectional title plan doesn't mean you don't need a building plan or vice versa. I often get confusion between the two, where people say, but I have a sectional title plan, why do I need a building plan, and vice versa? So the one is in accordance with the building regulations, the other one have to do with ownership. Then, of course, as Willie mentioned, the title deed. In the title deed, there can be restrictive title conditions, and there can be servitudes. Now, very often, and in most complexes, you will have a servitude on one of the sides for municipal sewerage purposes. That would be a 2 meter or 3 meter area where nothing can be erected, purely because underneath there would be a huge sewage pipe or a stormwater pipe. And the idea is that at some stage that pipe might have to be replaced, and council will want to ensure that there's no structures on that in that area, and therefore in the title deed you will find references to areas where you are not allowed to build anything.
Aubrey, if I can just come in here, sorry.
Yes.
I think maybe if you can just also highlight the fact that these conditions in the title, it is possible to have them removed, but then the process that requires to have them removed.
Okay, yes, thanks, Willie. In some cases it is possible, but often with these type of servitudes for municipal areas, it is not possible to have them removed because they serve the purpose of protecting the infrastructure. And in most cases, you cannot get any structures approved on top of those pipes. And therefore, it's important to ensure that permission is not given for something that will be in the servitude area. But as we'll see, a building plan can't be approved in those areas anyhow. So it will be picked up by council at when you submit the building plans. The problem we have is when structures are built without permission from council, and then it becomes a problem for the complex that needs to be dealt with. Okay, and then
Aubrey, sorry to interrupt you again. I just wanted to ask everyone, I wanted to do another poll. And okay. I know you've got that last word on there, spluma. I wanted to ask everyone if they know what spluma means.
Okay, we'll give them a minute or two.
So you'll see, I've just put a poll up. Yes or no, do you know what spluma is? A lot of no's, a lot of yeses as well. We'll just wait a couple seconds for everyone to answer, and then we can see what everyone's.
While we wait, can I ask you, perhaps I didn't see the results of the first poll. Can you just give me some feedback on our audience?
Of course. Okay, I'm just waiting for a couple seconds for them to finish, for everyone to finish the answering of this. Okay, I'm going to end it here, and I'm going to share the results. So 71% of people in the webinar say they don't know what Spluma is, whereas 29% say they do. So let's answer that question. And in terms of the first poll, we have 55% of people here on the webinar are managing agents, 34 and 32% respectively owner and trustees, and then 14% are others.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for that. Okay, what is Spluma? Spluma is the Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Act, 16 of 2013. Now, basically, that is a national law that replaced the old ordinances. So all land use is controlled by Spluma, and it is implemented differently by different municipalities, and therefore it is necessary again in your specific city or town to ask the town planners, how is Spluma applicable in this specific city or town. In Tshwane, there is no specific influence on sectional title, except that there's a bylaw whereby it is necessary to apply for a certificate, not a Spluma certificate, but in terms of the bylaws for extension of any section. We will look at that a bit later. And in Mpumalanga, Spluma certificates are required in most cases when transfer took place. I know there's some legal action being taken at this stage. I'm not up to date to the latest. Perhaps Willie knows more about that. But Spluma will in general not affect an existing scheme. It might be applicable when there's extensions and additions in your specific area. Okay, let's have a quick look at the typical request that trustees will receive for permission for additions and alterations. The first typical one, carports. I want to add a carport. Second one, adding a bedroom or a living room or a scullery. Then we have Lapas and Wendy's. Enclosing a patio, a balcony, or a courtyard, and then internal changes and converting garages into living areas. So we're just going to have a quick look at each of these on a very practical basis. It's by all means not a complete answer to all the questions, because then we'll be here until tomorrow morning. But let's start off with what you should consider when a request is received for a carport. Firstly, in most cases, the position where an owner wants to build the carport would be in front of his existing garage, outside of his section, as Willie explained. It would be common property, and therefore the first question you need to consider is ownership of that carport. Now, as it stands now, in most complexes that we deal with, no exclusive use areas have been registered, and carports that is erected in front of the garages is common property. Now, that is problematic in itself, purely because, in fact, anybody can use that carport. The problem with how property is sold at this stage is that estate agent or property practitioner will not necessarily have all the information available, and it will be sold to a new buyer as the existing dwelling with the garden, with the carport, and the lapa and whatever. In most or a lot of those cases, the carport does not belong to the section and it is common property. Now, it leaves a lot of questions. Who is supposed to maintain it? If it's common property, technically the body corporate is responsible, but it was erected by an owner, perhaps not up to standard even. Question is, what happens if there's a problem? Let's say the roof comes off and somebody is injured. Of course, that is a body corporate problem because it is common property. Now, to get permission for it, when ownership is sorted out, as we discussed, the site development plan must be changed. So it must be indicated on the site development plan, and council will then have a chance to see, will this carport affect the flow of traffic in the complex? It can look at things like, a fire engine. Should there be a fire, will this carport prevent the fire engine from reaching the unit where the fire is? So often in real life, it looks, oh, well, there's enough space, a car can squeeze by, but that is not the only requirement that council will look at. So firstly, the site development plan needs to be changed, submitted to council. And then, of course, we mentioned the title deed. In some title deeds, there's a restriction that say no buildings of wood or steel is allowed. Now, what is a carport built from? Steel. So if that condition is in the title deed, that will first have to be removed. And that in itself is a costly exercise. Then, as I said, the building plan is submitted. And at that stage, as well with the site development plan, things like the coverage will come into play. And once it is erected, the carport, of course, then inspection must be done to get the certificate of occupancy for that structure. A building plan indicates what the owner intends to build, but that is not to say that that is what was built. So you need a certificate from the building inspector to certify that this structure was built according to the specifications that is mentioned on the building plan. Unfortunately, often, especially with carports, they are built substandard, and they can and often become a problem at some stage. We had a case a while ago where a carport collapsed on an owner. Fortunately, he survived, but it is purely because it was substandard. It was not built according to requirements. There was no engineer certificate for it. And of course, if it happened in a complex and it's common property, it's the problem of the body corporate. So by just leaving illegal structures that was not built according to regulations in a complex can be very costly for the body corporate. The second one we want to look at is adding an additional bedroom, a living room, or scullery. Now, again, in this case, wherever you're going to add onto your section will be common property. Your section ends in the middle of the outside wall. So any addition that you make will be on common property, and therefore you obviously need permission, not only from the trustees, but from the body corporate. Willie have discussed the procedures to follow. Basically, you are going to use common property for your own purpose, and therefore you need to get permission from all your co-owners to do that, according to the prescriptions that Willie discussed. And then, of course, you again need to submit a site development plan. Again, council want to see coverage. They want to see, is this construction going to be safe? What type of foundations you're going to use? What type of material? And of course, all of those materials should be acceptable building methods.
Aubrey, can I just...
After the site development plan, a typical building plan indicating all the sewage, all the ventilation, fenestration, all the requirements that typically is for a building plan. And once you have that approval...
Can I just come in here quickly? Sorry, yes. Sarah, sorry that I jump in.
Yes, please.
We've had two very interesting questions in respect of what you're currently discussing. So one is a bedroom in an attic, and the other one was an addition of a mezzanine level inside a unit. So what would you say the situation is? Obviously, that will have an effect on the floor area ratio of the complex as a whole. So one obviously needs to go through the whole process. But I mean, I'm leaving it in your hands.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, yes, the same procedure. Well, you need to submit building plans. You don't have to submit. Well, council will possibly not expect you to submit a site development plan, purely because you're not really going to affect much, as far as coverage will not be affected. Floor area ratio is seldom a problem in a complex. So council can decide they want the site development change or not, but from experience, if the coverage is not affected, it should not be a big problem. There might be a problem where in the parking requirements, and we will look at that. Often there is, in the parking requirements would say, if it's 2 or 3 inhabitable rooms, 1 parking. If it's more than that, it's 2 parkings required. Now, if you create an additional inhabitable room, you might put the complex or that unit in a different caliber of unit, and you might have to provide the extra parking space that you might have to buy or get from the common property at some stage. So yeah, you still need building plans. If the site development plan, maybe not, for both of those situations. We will look at the extension just now. Of course, then you need to do the construction. And during the construction, you need to get the building inspector will come out, he will activate the plan, and he will make sure that the size and the positioning is the same as it is on your building plan. Just a very interesting fact that I think very few people know is that a building plan, when it's approved, is only valid for 12 months. If it is not activated by a building inspector. So when you do the foundations, the building inspector will come out and he will activate the plan, and then the plan will be valid forever. During the construction, he will come out a few times, and eventually, before you are allowed to start using it, you will get the building with the certificate of occupancy, and then you know the structure was built according to the approved building plan. Now, because we have extended the unit, and it must form part of the participation quota. Now you need to employ the services of a land surveyor or a qualified architect, but normally it's land surveyors, and the land surveyor will come and survey this new size of the unit of the section, and a new sectional title plan will be submitted to the Surveyor General. That will be approved. All of those documents will go to a conveyancer. The conveyancer will change the size of the unit, will be approved and registered, and that must then be given to your managing agent in the body corporate, because now your levy will increase because you now have a bigger unit. And as you all will know, levies are determined by the size of the unit as a participation quota. And a big problem in complexes is where people have made additions, but they haven't updated the sectional title plans. Technically, all the other owners are subsidizing those people that had made additions, and the PQs have not been adjusted. Let's quickly see if we can go to the next one. Lapas and Wendy's, problematic to start off with. Firstly, again, same question, ownership. Wendy's and Lapas that are built outside of your area obviously will be common property. So firstly, who's the owner? Typically, again, there's no exclusive use areas registered, so it belongs to everybody. Everybody can use it, and so don't be surprised if everybody come to your Lapa for a braai Saturday with the rugby. You cannot keep them out of it. The fact that you build it and paid for it, it's just very nice. You built a Lapa for the complex. If you don't sort out the ownership by means of either increasing your PQ or by registering exclusive use areas. Now again, same thing, site development plan, as we discussed, building plan, building inspector, inspections. Of course, for a Wendy, you don't have to go through all the processes for the building inspector, all the phases, but there's additional and very serious consequence of it, and that is because both of these structures is made of wood and is fire hazards. Mostly you will need to get a fire consultant to make a rational fire design before the plans will be approved. The problem with these type of structures is that they are often built in building line areas or in servitude areas, and therefore it's very difficult or impossible to get them approved. Just a side note, Wendy houses are only can only be approved for storage purposes, and under no circumstances can typical Wendy's be used for accommodation. They do not meet the criteria for people to stay in it, and therefore you always need to ensure that it's only for storage. A big problem for body corporates again is that should a fire start in these type of structures that's not approved and that don't conform with the building requirements, and some of the units get burned down, it becomes a body corporate problem because it's common property. The problem is when owners put up a Lapa or a Wendy, it's theirs. They want to use it for themselves. When there's a problem, like a claim or something, then suddenly it's common property. So it becomes the problem of all the other owners. And because your insurance is often only for brick and tile structures, the insurance company can refuse to pay out claims where the fire started, for instance, in a Wendy or a Lapa. And if Lapas are not built properly and electricity is put into Wendy houses, it can become a big problem. Let's quickly just go to the next one, enclosing of patios, balconies, and courtyards. Now, there we must first establish, is it common property or is it already part of the section? Typically, a site development plan might not be required if no roofed area is added, but council can ask anything. But you, of course, need a building plan for it, as we said. You need to get a certificate of occupancy. If the PQ must be increased because it was common property, of course, you go the route of the land survey and the conveyancer. And even if it's on the first floor, it's a balcony, nobody else can use it. But if it wasn't registered as part of your section at PQ, it's common property and you will not be paying a levy for it. And then all the issues comes in who's responsible for the maintenance. Of course, one thing that we haven't even looked at is the aesthetics. Part of a complex living means that you want, and council insists that it's a complex. So it should have similar finishes. And therefore, it is important as well that trustees ensure that when additions and alterations are made, that it fit into the overall aesthetics of the complex, because if that's not done, you will negatively affect the value of other owners' units, and that is not the idea. So again, with as we said, you need to have that information if you need to extend the PQ or not. And if that must happen, of course, the managing agent and the body corporate must be notified so that it can change. Let's quickly see if we go to the last one. Internal changes and converting garages. Internal changes can be made by owners if it's not affecting the structure of the property and it's not affecting the use of the property. Often owners don't have the ability to distinguish between a wall that can be removed, if it's a support structure or not. Building plans is still required, construction must take place, and then the certificate of occupancy must be renewed, of course. And then just the big problem that we sit with is garages that is converted. One of the issues in a complex is parking. On the site development plan, the parking requirements as required by the town planning scheme, by your zoning certificate, is indicated, and garages form part of the minimum parking requirements as required by council. So the idea of converting garages, even though it forms part of your section, is in most cases very problematic and should be discouraged. And the problem is that the vehicles of the owner now ends up on common property. So he have the advantage of another room, and all the owners are restricted in parking. Normally people will say, no, but there's enough parking. See, there's parking, but that is visitors parking. and therefore it should not be encouraged, and it is often difficult to get those approved, because if you allow one owner, you must allow everybody. Now imagine a complex of 50 units and 50 garages get converted, and you need to find additional parking for 50 cars. So that needs to be that. Okay. I think Section 28 is only in Tshwane applicable if you want to make an extension of your section. And I don't think we need to spend much time on that. You can inquire if you live in Tshwane. Let's just quickly look. So, okay, we have discussed that these documents should be in possession of the managing agent and the trustees, the amended sectional title plans, and all of this. So I think we can skip this one. We quickly just want to get to complex audits that our company do. And that is almost a requirement if you want to give permission for anybody to make additions and alterations. So because of all the illegal structures that was added, the trustees are not in a position to know if the coverage have been exceeded already. Parking, is the parking sufficient? So therefore, what we use all the legal documents, and we supply the body corporate with an audit. We go to each unit and we see what is on plan, what is on the site development plan, and we will give them a full report on the compliance of the complex. And it is quite scary, the results. You can see this is one that we're busy with now. All the red is illegal structures. They have exceeded their floor area ratio. There's all the problems that you can have. The older is complex, the bigger the problems. And it's just impossible for trustees to make informed decisions if you don't have the existing situation in your complex. So that's one. That's another one that we've done, and you can see all the red and black is all additions that either needs building plans or building plans, and the PQs need to be increased. Now you can imagine that all the other units is often paying part of the levies of those units that have not updated their sectional title plans. Okay, I think just to finish off again, the advice that if trustees or MAs give permission, make sure that you make the owner draw his attention on the fact that the body corporate permission, trustee permission is not what it's all about. You need to comply to all of these others. I think this was a very short and not complete version of what it is, but I think hopefully the awareness of how complicated it is left with the attendees, and perhaps at a later stage we can look at some of these in more detail.
Fantastic. Thanks, Aubrey. I have one more question to everyone that's attending here today. I want to know how compliant your body corporate is with regards to alterations or extensions. So you can answer extremely compliant, somewhat compliant, or not compliant. And let's see what everyone comes back with. Let's give you a couple minutes.
That will be very interesting. I can take a guess, but I would like to see the perception of the attendees. I'm not always sure that people is quite aware of exactly what the state of their complex is.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Aubrey, I think that when we were going through the webinar last week, we had a chat, and I said to you that in my experience, I've never seen a complex that has been 100% compliant. And I think you gave the same answer. So we'll see now from what the attendees think. But I've yet to seen a compliant complex. And I think trustees must work on getting compliant. Obviously, there are problems where certain things have been done in the past and the right process was not followed. That needs to be resolved. They need to make a decision how that's going to be resolved. Are you going to go back to the specific owner of that unit, or are you going to leave it up to the body corporate to do this? Where's the costing going to come from? So it has a dramatic effect on everybody and on levies, and to make that decision and to go through this process. So going through the process with your company can cost an enormous amount of money for a body corporate to actually get compliant, isn't it?
Yes, but the cost of not doing it is even more. We deal with complexes where the banks is hesitant to give bonds and mortgages, and the price of units does not really reflect what it should have been because of the state of the complex in total. So yeah, it might initially be expensive, but in the long run, I think it's more expensive just to let it be, and it never gets better on its own. It needs trustees to make a decision that they are going to follow their mandate to make sure that the complex is compliant, to protect everybody's interest.
Absolutely. And I think that is where Stratafin comes from, in that our financial products are there if body corporates require money and assistance to pay for all these costs, which a company like Aubrey's would charge to actually get a complex compliant. Then our product is there and it is available to be utilized in that respect. And as Aubrey said, I mean, at the end, it is more expensive in respect of the loss of your value in your unit than to actually just spend the money and get this compliant and get right and get your complex the way it should be.
Yes. Yeah. As I said, we do quite a bit of these investigations. In Tshwane and in Gauteng area, we can do the full investigations plus the full report. In other areas of the country, we can assist trustees whereby we can ask them to do some of the inspections and that for us, and we can assist them with all the legal and technical stuff and give them these same reports, so at least they know where they stand at the moment. So yeah, they're welcome to contact me if they're interested in any of those.
And I think the last thing that I want to say is that if there are any other questions that we haven't answered, I mean, send those questions in. We will give them to Aubrey to answer. And what we will do is we will also collate all of those and see if there are other issues that needs to be dealt with in finer detail. And Aubrey, if you would be so kind then to join us again so that we can actually run another webinar on those specific issues. If you would do that, we would really appreciate that. And I think the sectional title or the community scheme community would be appreciative of that.
I suggest that if we find one complex in the country that is totally compliant, we go there and we present it from there.
Definitely. Definitely.
Thank you
Fantastic.
very much.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, everyone. We have received so many questions. We just cannot get to all of them. So what we will do is we'll go back, we'll answer all the questions. And some of the questions were really tricky, practical questions. So we'll go back, give that some thought, and send you all the answers to those questions after the webinar is done. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Aubrey. Thank you, Jenny, for joining us from Multiprof. And we look forward to collaborating with you again in the future.
Thank you very much. It was very nice.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.